According to the book of James, if you're not bending over to look at the Bible, you're not doing it right. Now, you might be thinking, listen, I've read through the Bible. Nowhere does it say anything like that. Well, here's what James says in chapter 1, verse 22. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in a mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. But whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, not forgetting what they have heard, but doing it, they will be blessed in what they do. Well, maybe you're saying, I still don't see this idea of bending over. Well, look in verse 25 where it says, whoever looks intently. That Greek word literally means to stoop or bend over in order to look at. It's the same word that's used in John 20 when Peter and John run to the empty tomb on Easter morning. Verse 3 says, so Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. In other words, John bent over. Why? So he could get a closer look into the tomb. That's what the word literally means. And so what does James mean by it when he applies it to our studying the Word, studying the Bible? This passage in James is usually used to focus on the need for application when we read the Bible, applying the principles and living them out. And James uses this great analogy of a mirror, of someone who, walks up to a mirror and they notice something's wrong. My hair's out of place or I've got something on my face. But then the person just walks away and they don't do anything. They don't make a change. That's not how it's supposed to work. Well, James says the same thing's true with the Bible. We need to apply the lesson to our lives. But what often gets overlooked is not only do we need to apply the lesson, to do that we need to get the lesson. And James says that requires more than looking at the Bible. It requires this idea of looking intently. We often call the Bible the good book, but then we forget that means we need to read it like a good book. And there's 3 steps to reading a good book. The first one is just read it, on the observation level, what happened or what was said. When it comes to the Bible, observe that Noah built an ark, that David killed a giant, Peter walked on water, or that Paul said, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And the last step is application. I take the principle and apply it. Even a book that's not the Bible can have helpful things, but definitely with the Bible, I need to apply the principle. But here's the thing. God doesn't want us to apply the observation. God doesn't want you and I building an ark or definitely looking for a giant to kill. No, there's this crucial middle step of reflection. I need to reflect on what happened and what was said to see what's the point of this passage. What is the lesson that God intends for me as a Christian? And what's the theme, to use the literary term? The good book is a good book, and we need to read it that way. If you were to ask people today in the church, what's the biggest problem facing the church, the biggest challenge, you would get all sorts of answers. Here's what I would say. Underneath all of those specific challenges, the main issue facing the church is an ineffective approach to reading the Bible. Now, that starts with the fact that many Christians just don't read it at all or regularly. They don't spend the time to observe what happened or what was said. And obviously, you're not going to get anything out of the Bible that way. But also, if we do hear a lesson or read a lesson, if we don't make application, if we don't say, God, what do you want me to do in light of this lesson? Well, then our Bible study will be ineffective. But I guarantee you this middle step is missing almost across the board. Most people don't even know there is a middle step. And if they hear about this idea of reflecting, they don't know what it is. It's literally a lost skill today. At looking intently, these videos that are put out, they're the result of reflecting on a Bible passage, showing the lesson and then helping us apply that. But also, I want to make sure that we all learn this process ourselves. Because you're right, you don't have to bend over to study the Bible effectively, but you do have to look intently at it to study it effectively.